Hi there. So I thought for the Vermeer exhibition, instead of creating a whole bunch of text, that I would do a quick video of the paintings in the exhibition and just talk about them. Like I would talk about them in one of my classes that I teach. So let's go. We'll share screen. Okay, so for today, I want to talk first about the Vermeer painting of, let's see, it is the Milkmaid. The Milkmaid is in the permanent collection at the Rijksmuseum. And yeah, it's one of my favorite genre paintings in that it's one of my favorite genre paintings in general. And what do I mean by genre? In the Dutch style of art, they often created these paintings of like everyday life. It was the Dutch culture that actually created this art form. And I just love them. And they really embody a lot of what was special about Holland or the Netherlands at the time. The Netherlands was the big democratic experiment in that they gained independence from the Habsburg Empire and became a republic. And so with that, there is a lot of art was about celebrating like Dutch everyday life. And this painting of the Milkmaid is such an example. So first off, let's talk about the composition. So first, whenever I look at a composition, I always look at the simple things first. And so one of the things that I do is I look at the cross mark. And what this does is this tells you where the center of the composition is. And so there we go. We got we got the vertical, and then we have, where's my hand? There we go. And then we have a horizontal too. And with that, so along these two diagonals and this vertical and this horizontal axis is a visually important and significant spot when you're looking at a painting for composition wise. They by composition rules, they always encourage you not to put like your most important focal point on the center line. It creates visual tension and it invites the viewer in more if you have it a little bit off and a little bit off. And so Vermeer did both of that. However, what I think is really fascinating is, like, if we want to look at the hand in that picture is in a very important spot, and then the head too is in an important location of the composition. And then what I want to do is I read that the pinpoint for creating perspective that Vermeer used to create his 1-point perspective lines is right there. And if we take that line and we follow it, we'll see that the perspective of the window follows that perspective. It's a pretty short perspective. So that's kind of fun to know. Now, this table is an unusually shaped table. It is a table that has a peak and then goes back, and then it's a table that's designed to support the visual image that Vermeer is creating. Most people wouldn't have a table shaped like that in their house, but especially in their kitchen. But it doesn't matter, because this painting, even though it's made to look like every day, it is a choreographed setup. Another thing I want to point out is that it's really emphasizing every day. So she is actively pouring out milk, measuring out milk into this clay pot. And this right here is a coal foot warmer that often was used to keep like people warm in an unheated room. And another detail is that we've got a broken pane of glass right there. Poor housemaid doesn't her it's not been fixed. And then we have a marketing basket right there, and then a market pail is right there. And the market pail would be used for bringing home, like, say, fish on from the market. And then we have all these different types of breads, and she's pouring in. And one, I cannot remember where I heard this resource from, so unfortunately I can't tell you. But one of the things that potentially is this is an example of frugality, of like, because the Dutch culture really celebrated and the importance of being frugal and like waste not, want not, because what she is making with the milk and all this like bread, and it's a variety of breads, is she's probably making bread pudding. That's been surmised about it. So this is an amazing painting, and I hope and then let's talk a little bit about the structure of the painting. So this painting wise, it was created on a pretty tight weave linen. It's got a ground of pale brown and gray that has chalk, lead white, and umber mixed into it. And he used a dark underpainting to create like a black, almost a black underpainting to create the shape, the darkness. So, like, for example, the dark blues, and even like right here too, was underpainted with like his black. And you can even see right here where you have some of the umber underpainting peeping out in certain areas. And then he glazed over this dark underpainting with true ultramarine blue. So what's wonderful about this painting is that he totally used expensive pigments. Now, oftentimes in the Dutch era of the golden age of Dutch art, the artist would paint in at least 3 layers. You would have your underpainting layer, an imprimatura layer, and then you would have your what's called dead coloring layer, and then you have your working up layer, and then you have your finishing layer. And with that, your imprimatura is usually a black and white. It's almost a no-tin effect. In fact, let me find some images of some other imprimaturas, and of course we'll incorporate them into the other conversations as well. Let me see. I can't see. One moment. Find. Okay, there's that one, and then okay. So I found. Yep. Okay, I'm going to open this up. So here is. Okay, and then I'm going to open up one more image. Okay, so here is an X-ray image to show us the imprimatura layer of this painting. So essentially, your imprimatura layer could also be called a grisaille. It's essentially a light and dark. It's your no-tin design. And as you can see, you have in an X-ray, wherever there is lead white used quite a bit in your underpainting, it will come out white because it does not absorb those X-rays. And then, so you can see where the underlayer of the skirt is very black right there. Even her face and her shadow is quite a bit dark too. And some of the picture. So let's see if I can get a little bit closer in. And so with that, he used, and for example, here is an example of the girl with the pearl earring, how very like cartoonish Vermeer at times would use his imprimatura layer, that the grisaille of to set up that first underpainting, and then like you would then lay on top of that your dead coloring layer, which is some artists would use, and even Vermeer would occasionally use. What you would do is in your dead coloring layer, you use the cheaper pigments, and then only in your top layer, your open work and finishing layers, do you use the more expensive pigments. So like, for example, with blue, you have smalt blue, which is made, I can't remember quite, is made from pulverized cobalt blue glass. And it makes kind of a denim blue. It's not a brilliant blue. And then you have ultramarine blue. And ultramarine blue is made from pulverizing lapis lazuli, which is a semi-precious stone that is found in the Himalaya mountains of Afghanistan, which I'll just say as a little side note, is where lapis lazuli is still being mined for, like, what is it, authentic ultramarine blue that like Daniel Smith, the paint manufacturer out in Oregon, they sell a lapis lazuli ultramarine blue that comes from Afghanistan too. So that has always been historically the best source of the lapis lazuli that's used in ultramarine blue. And Vermeer kind of in this painting skipped over on the skirt and never even used the smalt blue. He went from his dark underpainting, like using black to create his folds, to ultramarine blue. However, like if you want to see the difference between smalt blue and ultramarine blue, this is ultramarine blue, this is ultramarine blue, this is what smalt blue looks like. And then like, I just want to like dig into a pigment here too. So do you see this green, and do you see like right there, that glaze? That's something that Vermeer did often. That's an ultramarine blue glaze that he would lay over to create shadow shapes, to make those blue cast shadow shapes in his folds. And we're just, my goodness, we're so lucky that he created paint, that he created his paintings like this. Look at that. I just absolutely love this hat and how the hat reacts to the background. It's a beautiful painting. The details, and we're going to get to see this in person. I cannot wait. I am so excited to be sharing this experience with you guys. And yeah, it's going to be amazing. So here's another example. Probably this was used a combination of smalt blue with the lapis lazuli ultramarine blue in places too. Just beautiful. Now, how do you get these paint effects? And we're going to see this over and over again. He used a variety of paint layers. So Vermeer, what made Vermeer so wonderful is he used his layers of paint, and he played with paint texture. So like, and what I mean by paint texture is like he would investigate and like play off the opacity and the texture of his paint layers. So sometimes he would lay down a transparent and then lay an opaque or semi-opaque over it, and then another transparent, but then like to heighten certain effects, like along here, like that daub right there and that daub there. You got some daubs here. He would then lay down an opaque, kind of thick impasto-y daubs of paint as well. And a lot of his paints, he used a slow drying glaze. So like you can see that some of the brushstrokes still are showing, but at the same time, the mediums he used would often, they did not spread easily. So like, for example, the difference between using in our modern materials that we have available, you can use like refined linseed oil, but that spreads really smoothly and fast very quickly. So you lose your brush strokes very quickly. You could use stand oil. Stand oil is lead oil, that linseed oil that has been it just gets thickened, so it's been dehydrated some, and that has a little bit more body. But then you can use another medium, like say oleo gel, which is it keeps its brush strokes. And so, like for example, Vermeer probably used a medium like oleo gel, the equivalent of like what we have now available to us. And that's also like, so for example, let's zoom in. I'll just zoom in real quick. So like, see that brushstroke right there? That is like, that type of brushstroke is created by like putting down a daub of like paint mix then with like stand oil. And why do I say that? Is because that center part right there, oops, let me make my brush a little bit smaller. See this part of the brushstroke right there, but the total brushstroke is that. So the paint going down that's the paint daub. But if he used also a pointy or a round brush, the paint that's on that brush, as it goes down, it gushes. Like, so if this is your canvas and you've got your pointy brush that's got paint on it, it will gush like that, and it will leave an indentation of that brush stroke. And you can see that there's some there too. And then like this brush stroke doesn't have that. And that's how that type of brush stroke is applied, is you have your canvas surface and you've got your paintbrush, but instead, and you've got paint on that paintbrush, but you never allow the fibers of the brush to touch the surface. So essentially it's a pure paint to paint transfer. And you use a really light touch versus the one where it gushes, you would be using a harder touch. And that's what I think there's a universality in the way Vermeer painted. However, I mean, he painted things so amazingly. However, there is also an extreme mastery of oil paint as a medium too. So that's what makes, I think, Vermeer so absolutely amazing, is you've got a wonderful storytelling narrative in his paintings, along with just masterful skill set as well. So, okay, so this is the Milkmaid. And thank you so much. I will be back with more videos real soon.